More, what if the conflict in your home isn't just personalities clashing, but a spiritual pressure you can discern and disarm? Friends, more, we do not live in a neutral world. There are influences that build and influences that break. More, before we talk about spotting demons, let's be very clear about two things. First, people are not your enemy, patterns are. More, we don't label loved ones, we discern what's working through the moment. Second, compassion and wisdom can walk together. If there's abuse or danger, more, get help and get safe. Discernment doesn't make you a judge, it makes you a guardian of peace. Discernment shines where light, truth, love, more, and peace are present. Deception thrives in confusion, compulsion, and fear. More, this simple contrast is one of the clearest ways to understand how to spot when something unhealthy is at work in the lives of our friends and family. More, if you think about it, every atmosphere you step into carries a tone. Some spaces lift you, settle you, and give you courage. Others leave you drained, more, unsettled, or questioning your worth. That atmosphere is not an accident. It often reveals whether light or darkness has taken root in a heart, more a conversation or a relationship dynamic. Light never has to manipulate or coerce, it simply reveals, warms, and invites. Darkness, however, relies on fog, more pressure and distortion to maintain influence. More, recognizing this difference is the first step in learning to discern what is truly operating in those close to us. More, the presence of light brings truth into focus. When you are around someone who is walking in clarity and health, their influence brings out honesty in you. More, you feel freer to confess, freer to ask questions, freer to be yourself. Lies lose their grip in the presence of light. But when deception is at play, more, conversations feel twisted, facts are blurred, and reality feels harder to grasp. More, you may leave feeling like you are the problem even when you have done nothing wrong. This is confusion at work. More, and confusion is one of the hallmarks of a destructive influence. Light stabilizes, deception destabilizes. Love is another marker. Love, more, when it is genuine, carries no hidden hooks. It is patient, kind, and willing to release control. True love empowers you to grow. More, it does not cling to you out of fear or demand blind loyalty. But when something darker is influencing someone, more, love becomes distorted into possession or control. Instead of being empowered, you are manipulated. Instead of encouragement, you hear veiled threats. More, if you don't do this, you don't really care. That is not love. It is compulsion dressed up as care. And when compulsion replaces compassion, more, you know you are dealing with something that is not of the light. Peace is the third marker. Peace does not mean the absence of conflict. More, but it does mean the presence of stability and rest even in the middle of tension. When someone carries peace, more, their presence quiets storms rather than stirs them up. After speaking with them, you feel more grounded, not less. More, but when fear and unrest follow you out of every interaction, when conversations always spiral into drama or leave you second guessing your worth, more, it is a clear sign that darkness is being allowed to influence the atmosphere. Fear is a prison guard that seeks to keep you captive. More, but peace is a guide that leads you to freedom. Discernment, then, is not about suspicion or labeling people as evil. More, it is about recognizing atmospheres and fruits. Jesus himself said that a tree is known by its fruit. More, if the fruit of someone's words and actions consistently brings clarity, empowerment, and rest, then the light is at work. More, but if the fruit repeatedly brings confusion, pressure, and fear, then deception is operating. We must learn to trust what the fruit is telling us. More, not just the excuses or justifications someone offers. More, this is especially important with friends and family, because love for them can make us blind to patterns. We excuse hurtful words as just stress, or manipulative tactics as their way of showing care. But discernment calls us to see beneath the surface. More, loving someone does not mean ignoring the darkness they may be yielding to. In fact, true love requires that we bring light into the situation. Well, when we discern deception, we are empowered to pray with authority, to set boundaries with wisdom. More, and to invite truth back into the center of the relationship. More, we must also recognize that discernment is a gift that grows sharper the more we walk in light ourselves. If our hearts are full of resentment, bitterness, more unchecked fear, our ability to distinguish truth from deception will be clouded. But as we anchor ourselves in God's Word, in prayer, more, and in healthy community, our inner compass becomes steadier. We begin to see more clearly where truth is shining and where lies are operating. More. This means discernment is not just about pointing outward. It begins with looking inward and ensuring our own lives are aligned with truth, love, more, and peace. Spotting demons in friends and family is not about labeling them as the enemy, but identifying the forces working through confusion, compulsion, more, and fear. Our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual influences that thrive in the shadows. And the good news is light always wins. More. The smallest candle overcomes the deepest darkness. When we cultivate light in ourselves, we become that candle in every room we walk into. More. By carrying truth, love, and peace, we naturally expose deception, compulsion, and fear without even trying. More. Discernment becomes less about suspicion and more about shining so brightly that darkness has nowhere to hide. This keynote, then, more, is not just a warning but an invitation. It reminds us that discernment is accessible to anyone willing to stay rooted in light. More, it challenges us to trust the evidence of atmospheres and fruits rather than excuses. More, and it equips us to respond with wisdom and courage rather than fear or condemnation. Light reveals, love empowers, peace steadies, and with these, more, we can spot deception no matter where it hides. That is the power of discernment. More, and it is the first defense against the destructive influences that seek to divide and devour. Look for patterns, not isolated moments. More, cycles of manipulation, secrecy, and spiritual heaviness reveal more than a single bad day. This truth is central to discernment. More, because one of the easiest traps we fall into is excusing away repeated harmful behavior as just a phase, or they were having a rough day. Everyone has bad days. More, everyone can speak harshly or make mistakes, but when the same harmful patterns repeat over and over, more, when the same destructive cycles circle back no matter how many times apologies are given, more, that is no longer about personality or mood, it is about influence. More, darkness thrives not in isolated mistakes, but in repeated cycles that shape atmospheres and relationships. More, and if we do not step back far enough to see the pattern, more, we will continually excuse the damage of a single moment without realizing we are living under a spiritual weight that is stealing peace, joy, more, and stability. One moment of manipulation may be brushed off, but when manipulation is the rhythm of interaction, it is a pattern. More. It often looks like being guilt, tripped into choices you didn't want to make, shamed for having boundaries. More, or constantly made to feel responsible for someone else's happiness. Over time, these tactics become so common that you begin to think it's normal. More, that is the danger of patterns. They normalize what is actually toxic. And when manipulation becomes a repeated cycle, more, it reveals a spirit of control at work, not love. Secrecy is another pattern that signals more than a one-time mistake. More, everyone keeps a private thought or two, but secrecy as a lifestyle is something different. It thrives in deception, hidden motives, more, and behind closed doors conversations. When someone always asks you to keep secrets, especially ones that isolate you from others or demand dishonesty, more, a pattern of darkness is operating. Healthy love doesn't need to hide, it lives in the light. When secrecy becomes habitual, more, when lies are the first response instead of the last resort, more. You are not dealing with mere weakness. You are seeing evidence of a deeper influence that fears exposure. More, spiritual heaviness is yet another recurring pattern that deserves attention. We all go through valleys and battles. More, but if you notice that time with someone consistently leaves you feeling spiritually drained, weighed down, or unsettled, you must take note. More. It's one thing to occasionally share in someone's sorrow or help them through a struggle. It's another thing entirely when every conversation, more every gathering, carries a cloud of despair or anger that never lifts. Darkness brings weight, light brings relief. More, if a relationship repeatedly leaves you suffocating rather than strengthened. More, you may be dealing with more than just human struggle. You may be seeing the footprint of a spiritual battle. More, what makes patterns so difficult to spot is our tendency to focus only on single moments. More, we excuse manipulation because they were stressed. We accept secrecy because they didn't want to worry me. We tolerate heaviness because life has been hard on them. On their own. More, those statements can be true, but when the same explanations repeat month after month, year after year, it is no longer an explanation, it is a cycle. More, discernment asks us to zoom out. Instead of asking, was this moment justified? We should ask, more, what does the overall pattern reveal? A moment can be excused, but a cycle cannot. More, the power of identifying patterns is that it frees you from confusion. Darkness wants you stuck evaluating moments. More, because moments can always be explained away. But when you see a pattern, excuses lose their power. Patterns reveal truth with clarity. More, they show you what words often deny. And when you can name the pattern, you can finally break free from its hold. More, recognizing patterns does not mean condemning people. It means discerning the influences that are shaping them. It means you can pray specifically, more, set boundaries wisely, and love them without being blinded. For instance, if someone has a pattern of secrecy, more, you can choose not to participate in hidden agendas. If manipulation is the pattern, you can set firm boundaries and refuse to be controlled by guilt. More, if heaviness is the pattern, you can cover them in prayer without allowing their storm to drown your peace. More, patterns equip you to respond with wisdom rather than confusion. Most importantly, spotting patterns reminds us that transformation is possible. More, patterns can be broken. Darkness does not get the final word, but cycles only break when they are named and resisted. More, you cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. When you spot the repetition, you gain the power to call it what it is and seek God's intervention. More, prayer becomes sharper when it targets the actual stronghold instead of the symptoms. More, boundaries become stronger when they are built around long-term health rather than momentary relief. More, hope becomes real when you remember that cycles can change, because light always has the power to break repetition. The call is simple. Do not let isolated moments blind you from repeated cycles. Look past the excuses. Step back and see the big picture. When you notice manipulation repeating, secrecy multiplying, or heaviness settling, more, you are not just dealing with human weakness. You are discerning a spiritual pattern. And once you see the pattern, you can shine the light of truth on it. More, light breaks cycles. Love interrupts manipulation. Peace replaces heaviness. And when you walk in discernment, more, you can refuse to live under the weight of deception and instead invite the freedom of truth. Use the fruit test. More, does this influence consistently produce division, shame, and chaos, or love, joy, and self-control? More, this question goes to the heart of discernment, because people can say all the right words, put on the perfect image, and even act convincingly spiritual. More, yet the real evidence of what drives them shows up in the fruit of their lives. Words can deceive, but fruit cannot lie. When Jesus said, more, you will know them by their fruits, he gave us a simple and reliable way to distinguish what comes from light and what comes from darkness. More, fruit is the lasting outcome of repeated choices and attitudes. You cannot fake it forever. Eventually, the tree reveals its nature. More, division is one of the clearest signs that an unhealthy influence is at work. It creeps in subtly. At first, it might sound like concern. More, I just don't think they really understand you the way I do. But slowly, relationships begin to fracture. More, people who once stood together now stand apart, suspicious of one another, isolated and disconnected. More, a person influenced by darkness often thrives in sowing seeds of mistrust and whispering half-truths that separate people from their support systems. More, the fruit is not unity, encouragement, or reconciliation, it is division. And when division is the pattern, More, you can be sure the tree producing it is not rooted in the Spirit of God. Shame is another toxic fruit that reveals destructive influence. More, healthy conviction draws you back to love, but shame leaves you feeling stuck and condemned. More, when someone consistently makes you feel never enough, when every conversation leaves you carrying guilt for things you shouldn't own. More, or when you constantly feel belittled rather than built up, you are tasting the fruit of shame. This fruit is dangerous because it quietly erodes identity. More, it makes you question your worth, your abilities, and even your faith. Love never produces this kind of lingering condemnation. Love may correct more, but it always restores. If the fruit leaves you crushed rather than renewed, it is not from the tree of light. Chaos is yet another revealing fruit. More, where the Spirit of God is present, there is order, peace, and clarity. Where other influences take root, confusion, drama, and instability reign. More, notice if every interaction with a certain person seems to pull you into crisis after crisis, or if their presence always stirs conflict, noise, more, and turmoil. Some people live in chaos because they are carrying chaos. And when chaos becomes the consistent result of their words and actions, more, you must recognize that fruit for what it is. It is evidence of a deeper root feeding on something other than peace. More, the fruit of light looks radically different. Love is a fruit that gives, heals, and sacrifices without hidden motives. More, real love doesn't manipulate or control. It empowers you to grow and feel safe. Joy is another fruit of light. It isn't shallow happiness, more, but deep gladness that strengthens even in hardship. Joy is contagious, uplifting everyone it touches. And then there is self-control, more, one of the most overlooked but powerful fruits. When someone is truly walking in light, more, they don't need to control others because they are already controlling themselves. They can restrain anger, resist manipulation, more, and handle power responsibly. The fruit test helps us avoid falling into the trap of appearances. More, someone can appear kind in public but leave behind a wake of division in private. More, someone can appear spiritual in prayer meetings but use shame to control others behind closed doors. Appearances can fool us for a season. More, but fruit tells the truth over time. That's why the fruit test requires patience. You may not know the true nature of a tree after one day, more, one conversation, or even 1 year. But give it time and the fruit will always reveal the root. Applying the fruit test also keeps us humble. More, instead of only evaluating others, it challenges us to look at the fruit of our own lives. Are we producing peace or chaos? More, do others feel condemned after being with us, or do they feel built up and encouraged? Do we heal relationships? More, or do we fracture them with suspicion and gossip? The same principle that helps us discern others also helps us evaluate ourselves. More, the Spirit's fruit should be visible in us just as much as we look for it in others. What do we do when we identify bad fruit? First, more, acknowledge it without fear. Don't excuse division as just drama or shame as just their way. Call the fruit what it is. Second, more, guard your spirit. If the fruit of someone's influence is consistently toxic, you must protect your heart and mind by setting boundaries. More, that doesn't mean you stop loving them, but it does mean you stop allowing their fruit to infect your garden. Finally, pray for transformation. More, trees can change if their roots are replanted. Just as toxic fruit reveals darkness, more, healthy fruit reveals that redemption is always possible when someone allows light to take root. More, the fruit test is powerful because it keeps us grounded in reality. It cuts through words, appearances, and excuses, and it points us straight to evidence. More, division, shame, and chaos reveal a root problem. Love, joy, and self-control reveal life flowing from the Spirit. More, this test is not about judgment. It is about discernment, clarity, and protection. By using it, we align ourselves with truth. More, shield ourselves from deception and anchor our lives in the evidence of what really matters. Pay attention to words twisting truth, constant accusation, more, and honeyed flattery that isolates you from wise voices are red flags. Words are not just casual sounds. They are carriers of power, shaping atmospheres, more, planting seeds, and directing the course of relationships. Scripture tells us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. More, that means every word spoken has weight. When you are discerning whether a destructive influence is at work in a friend or family member, more, listening carefully to their words is one of the most revealing practices you can adopt. Words reveal what is hidden in the heart. More, they uncover motives and expose the spirit behind a person's actions far more clearly than appearances do. More, one of the clearest signs of unhealthy influence is the twisting of truth. This doesn't always come in the form of blatant lies. More often it appears as subtle distortion. More, someone may slightly change the facts to cast themselves in a better light or exaggerate details to make you question your own memory. Over time, more, this twisting leaves you feeling disoriented, unsure of what's real. More, you might find yourself second-guessing conversations you were certain about or apologizing for things you never did. More, this is not mere miscommunication, it's a tactic of deception. When words are used to distort rather than to clarify, more, to confuse rather than to enlighten, it is a clear signal that darkness is at work. Constant accusation is another dangerous fruit of toxic words. More, accusation wears down your spirit, often showing up in subtle but relentless criticism. It may sound like, "Well, you never do enough," "You always let me down," or "You're the reason things are falling apart." These words don't point towards solutions or reconciliation. More, they aim to condemn. While healthy correction identifies problems with a path to restoration, accusation traps you in cycles of guilt with no way out. More, a person under the influence of accusation often cannot celebrate progress because they are too focused on keeping you under a cloud of failure. More, living under constant accusation is spiritually suffocating, and it is a tactic designed to keep you powerless. Equally dangerous, though more deceptive, more is the trap of honeyed flattery. At first, flattery feels like affirmation. Who doesn't enjoy being praised? More. But discernment requires us to notice the motive behind the words. Genuine encouragement builds you up without strings attached. Flattery, however, more often has an agenda. It praises you to gain your loyalty or to isolate you from the counsel of others. You may hear phrases like, "More, no one understands you the way I do," or "You're so much better than the people around you." While those words seem sweet, more, they are actually sowing seeds of division. They elevate you in a way that subtly cuts you off from other voices of wisdom and accountability. More, once you are isolated, you are far easier to control. Red flags also appear in how people use their words during moments of conflict. More, do they use honesty to bring resolution, or do they use exaggeration and character assassination to gain power? Do they allow room for your perspective? More, or do their words always silence and dominate? Healthy relationships make space for honest dialogue, but toxic influences use words as weapons to win rather than tools to heal. Recognizing this distinction is vital. The challenge, of course, is that words can be so easily disguised. More, twisting truth often masquerades as just telling it like it is. Accusation can hide behind the mask of concern. Flattery can present itself as encouragement. That is why discernment requires us not just to listen to the words themselves, but to measure the fruit they produce. More, after hearing these words, do you feel freer, more grounded, more at peace? Or do you feel trapped, confused, shamed, or isolated? More, words that come from light always produce clarity, healing, and stability. Words that come from darkness leave you unsettled, guilty, and alone. More, once you recognize the pattern of toxic words, the next step is to respond with truth. More, do not try to argue endlessly with twisted words. You will only get caught in the fog. Instead, more, anchor yourself in what is true and refuse to be drawn into cycles of confusion. When accusations come, more, remind yourself of who you are and what God has already spoken over your life. When flattery attempts to isolate you, more, lean into wise counsel and resist the temptation to believe you are above accountability. When twisting tries to cloud reality, write things down, More, document the truth and stand firm in clarity. Words may wound, but truth has the power to dismantle deception. More, this is why surrounding yourself with life, giving words is essential. Fill your heart with scripture, encouragement, and affirmations of truth. More, the more your inner world is anchored in what is real, the easier it becomes to recognize when destructive words are trying to pull you away. More, words are contagious. If you consistently consume words of life, you will be strong enough to resist words of death. More, paying attention to words is not about becoming suspicious or paranoid, but about becoming wise. Words reveal patterns faster than almost anything else. More, someone may hide actions for a while, but eventually their speech betrays their heart. More, if you train yourself to listen, not just to what is said, but to what the words produce, you will be equipped to discern the difference between influence that builds and influence that destroys. More, words that twist truth, accuse without mercy, or flatter with hidden agendas are red flags waving clearly if you will only open your ears. More, and when you see those flags, you have the power to respond with wisdom, boundaries, and prayer. Respond with prayerful authority and healthy boundaries. More, love is patient, but it isn't passive or permissive. Many people confuse love with tolerance, believing that if they truly love their friends and family, more they must accept everything without question or resistance. But real love does not stand idly by while destructive patterns continue unchecked. Love acts, more not to condemn, but to protect, to restore, and to guard what is sacred. This is why discernment must be followed by action. More, it's not enough to recognize unhealthy influences. We must learn how to respond. More, and that response begins with prayerful authority and continues with healthy boundaries that keep love strong without enabling destruction. More, prayerful authority means realizing that you are not powerless in the face of manipulation, secrecy, or spiritual heaviness. More, you are not called to fight with the same weapons of accusation or control that darkness uses. More, your strength comes from standing in the authority that has already been given to you in God's presence. More, prayer is not a last resort, it is the first line of defense. It shifts the atmosphere, breaks chains that arguments cannot. More, and invites light into places where confusion once ruled. When you pray with authority, you do more than ask for help. You declare what is true, more, resist what is false, and call on the power of God to do what human reasoning cannot. Prayerful authority also aligns your heart. Without prayer, more, you may respond to destructive influences with anger, bitterness, or despair, but prayer cleanses your motives. More, ensuring that your actions are rooted in love, not revenge. It helps you see people as captives of deception rather than enemies to be crushed. More, this perspective is crucial because when you understand that people are not the enemy, patterns and spiritual forces are, you can confront problems without losing compassion. More, prayer keeps you centered so that your words, actions, and boundaries reflect light instead of darkness. But authority in prayer is only the beginning. More, healthy boundaries are the practical expression of love in action. Boundaries are not walls to shut people out. More, they are doors that define how love can flow freely without being corrupted. For example, if manipulation is the pattern, more, a healthy boundary might be refusing to give in to guilt trips or emotional blackmail. If secrecy is the pattern, more, a boundary may mean refusing to keep harmful secrets or insisting on transparency in important matters. If heaviness is the pattern, more, boundaries may involve limiting how much time you spend in conversations that drain you while still praying for the person from a distance. More, love without boundaries quickly becomes enabling. When you allow destructive patterns to continue unchecked in the name of love, more, you are not actually loving. You are allowing darkness to remain comfortable. True love risks offending in order to protect. It says, more, I care too much about you and myself to let this continue. Boundaries are a way of drawing lines that destructive influences cannot cross. More, they communicate clearly what is acceptable and what is not. They are not harsh, they are holy. More, they make space for truth to thrive and for relationships to heal in healthy ways. Responding with healthy boundaries also protects your own spirit. More, if you consistently expose yourself to words, actions, or patterns that drain your peace and poison your joy, more, you cannot remain strong enough to love effectively. Boundaries are like guardrails on a road. They keep you from veering into danger. More, they allow you to remain steady, even when others choose instability. In fact, setting boundaries often models to others what wholeness looks like. More, it shows them that love can be firm and that respect is possible without fear. Some people will resist your boundaries. More, they may accuse you of being unloving or selfish. But remember, boundaries are not designed to please others. They are designed to protect what is sacred. More, you are responsible for guarding your peace, your mind, and your heart. If someone truly values the relationship, more, they will eventually respect your boundaries. If they do not, then their resistance only proves that the boundary was necessary. More, responding with prayerful authority and healthy boundaries is not about cutting people off or walking away at the first sign of difficulty. More, it is about standing firm in truth while keeping your heart open to reconciliation. Love is patient, it waits praise and believes for change. More, but love is not passive. It does not sit silently while destruction continues unchecked. More, and love is not permissive. It does not allow toxic patterns to grow unchecked in the name of peace. Love acts, love prays, love protects. More, the combination of prayer and boundaries creates an atmosphere where change can happen. Prayer softens hearts and breaks spiritual strongholds. More, boundaries create the conditions where unhealthy patterns are exposed and confronted. Together, more, they ensure that your response to darkness is neither weak nor cruel, but wise and effective. More, so when you recognize destructive influences at work, in friends or family, do not give in to despair. Do not believe the lie that nothing can change. More, stand in prayerful authority, declare truth, invite light, and refuse to partner with confusion. Then establish healthy boundaries, clear, firm, more, and rooted in love. In this balance, you embody love that is patient yet strong, compassionate yet courageous, gentle yet unshakable. More, that is how you love without enabling and respond without being consumed. Stay in community, seek counsel, protect your safety. More, and hold on to hope. People are not the enemy, dark influences are. One of the greatest deceptions of destructive spiritual influence is isolation. More, darkness wants you alone, cut off from those who can give perspective, support, and wisdom. When you are alone, confusion grows louder, fear feels heavier. More, and lies sound more convincing. But when you walk in healthy community, the fog begins to clear. More, the presence of others who love truth and love you becomes a safeguard against deception. More, staying in community is not optional. It is essential for discernment and for freedom. Community provides perspective. More, when you are entangled in manipulation, secrecy, or spiritual heaviness, it can be hard to see the situation clearly. You may excuse harmful patterns. More, question your own memory, or feel guilty for setting boundaries. But a trusted community can help you see what you cannot. More, wise friends or mentors are like mirrors reflecting truth back to you. They can gently say, more, this is not normal, or you are not imagining this, or you have the right to stand firm. Their perspective becomes an anchor when your emotions are stormy and your thoughts are scattered. More, without community, you are far more vulnerable to being convinced that lies are truth and that unhealthy cycles are unavoidable. More, community also provides safety. Some situations are not only spiritually heavy, but physically or emotionally unsafe. More, when destructive influences manifest in abuse, threats, or extreme control, you need more than prayer. You need protection. More, this is where community becomes a lifeline. It may mean confiding in a counselor, a spiritual leader, or even law enforcement when danger is real. More, protecting your safety is not a lack of faith, it is wisdom. God never calls you to stay in harm's way to prove your loyalty. More, true community helps you take steps to safeguard yourself and those you love while still praying for the one caught in destructive patterns. More safety is a boundary that love fully affirms. Another gift of community is accountability. Left on our own, we can make excuses, backtrack on boundaries, more slip back into unhealthy cycles out of fear or guilt. But when others know your situation and walk with you, more, they can remind you of the truth when you are tempted to forget it. They can encourage you when you feel weak, pray for you when you feel drained, more, and celebrate with you when progress is made. Accountability is not about control. It is about companionship on the path to freedom. More, it reminds you that you are not alone, and it strengthens your resolve to stand firm. Perhaps most importantly, community helps you hold on to hope. When dealing with destructive influences in family or friends, it is easy to become wary. You may feel like nothing will ever change, more, like cycles will repeat forever, or like your prayers are going unanswered. But when you are surrounded by others who believe with you, hope is kept alive. More, they can remind you of stories of breakthrough, speak faith over your situation, and encourage you to keep pressing forward. Hope is contagious, more, and in a circle of believers it multiplies. This hope is vital because despair is one of the enemy's strongest weapons. If you lose hope, more, you stop fighting, but if you stay in community, hope keeps you moving forward. It's important to remember that people are not the enemy. More, when dealing with destructive patterns, the temptation is to label loved ones as the problem. More, but discernment reminds us that the real enemy is the spiritual influence behind the patterns. People can change. Hearts can be healed. More, patterns can be broken. That is why we continue to pray, continue to love, and continue to hope. At the same time, more, we do not let compassion blind us to the reality of danger or deception. We love people while resisting the dark influences that work through them. More, staying in community also keeps pride in check. When you try to fight alone, you can easily believe you are strong enough to handle it by yourself. More, but the truth is no one is meant to carry these battles alone. We were created for relationship, for fellowship, more, for walking together in both joy and struggle. Admitting you need help is not weakness, it is wisdom. And when you walk in community, more, your discernment grows sharper, your strength deeper, and your heart steadier. The call to stay in community is about choosing connection over isolation, more, wisdom over secrecy, and hope over despair. When you seek counsel, you gain clarity. When you protect your safety, you honor the value of your life. More, when you hold on to hope with others by your side, you resist the lie that darkness has the final say. And through it all, more, you remember that your battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the forces that seek to divide, deceive, and destroy. So do not fight alone. More, do not carry burdens in silence. Surround yourself with wise voices, loving friends, and faithful intercessors. Allow community to be your anchor, more, your shield, and your source of hope. In the safety of community, deception loses its grip, patterns are exposed, and the strength to endure is renewed. People are not your enemy, dark influences are, and together in the light you can overcome every shadow. As we bring this journey to a close, more, let us step back and see the full picture. We began with the reminder that discernment shines where light, truth, love, and peace are present, more, and that deception thrives in confusion, compulsion, and fear. That was our foundation, understanding that atmospheres reveal far more than appearances. More, then we learn not to be deceived by isolated moments, but to look for patterns, manipulation, secrecy, more, and spiritual heaviness that show themselves over time. These patterns do not lie, they reveal what is truly at work. From there, more, we discovered the fruit test, the most practical measure of all. Division, shame, and chaos are not the fruit of light, but love, joy, and self-control are. More, by their fruit you will know them. Then we leaned in closer to words, the twisted truth, constant accusations, more, and even honeyed flattery that seeks to isolate you from the voices of wisdom. Words reveal hearts, and hearts reveal influences. More, yet recognition is not enough. We must respond, And we respond not with panic or fear, but with prayerful authority and healthy boundaries. More, love is not passive. It protects, corrects, and refuses to enable destruction. And finally, we anchored ourselves in community, knowing that isolation feeds deception, but wise counsel brings safety, accountability, and hope. People are not the enemy. Dark influences are. Together, more in the light, we stand stronger than any shadow. So what does all this mean for you today? It means you do not need to live in confusion. More, you do not need to remain bound by manipulation, secrecy, or shame. You do not need to tolerate chaos as though it were normal. More, you have been given discernment. You have been entrusted with light. You can test the fruit, listen to the words, identify the patterns, more, and then respond with prayer, boundaries, and hope-filled community. You are not powerless. You are not alone. And the most powerful truth of all is this: more, darkness never wins where light is welcomed. The smallest flame overcomes the deepest shadow. When you carry light into your friendships, your family, more, and your home, deception loses its hiding place. When you walk in love that is strong and steady, when you set boundaries that protect without bitterness, more, when you pray with authority that shifts the atmosphere, you become a carrier of peace in a world desperate for it. So leave here today resolved, more, resolved to see clearly, resolved to stand firmly, resolved to love courageously. Do not fear the darkness that may try to work through those around you, more, but confront it with wisdom, discernment, and grace. Do not give up on people, but do not give in to destructive patterns either. More, stand in the balance of truth and love, of compassion and courage, of prayer and action. And above all, remember this: the goal is not to label others, more, but to liberate atmospheres. The goal is not to point fingers, but to open windows for light to shine through. As you walk in discernment, more, you will not only spot the influence of darkness, you will carry the presence of light that drives it out. So walk boldly, walk wisely. More, walk in love that refuses to be silent, and in peace that refuses to be shaken. And may every room you enter testify that where light is carried, more, darkness cannot remain.